The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast savanna, casting a warm golden hue across the land. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and tall grasses that swayed in rhythm with the wind. In the distance, the silhouettes of massive creatures could be seen moving across the horizon. Giant elephants, their enormous forms casting long shadows on the ground. They were the true rulers of the land, each step shaking the earth beneath them as they moved in herds, towering over everything in their path. But for the small group of Homo erectus, they were both a blessing and a curse. The tribe had been living in this region for generations, learning the ways of the land and adapting to its many dangers. The trees provided shelter, the river offered fish and water, and the tall grasses hid predators and prey alike. Yet the giants of the savanna presented a new kind of challenge. Their size and power were unmatched, and the very ground trembled when they moved. The tribe's survival depended on the delicate balance between respecting the elephant's territory and hunting the smaller animals that roamed the savanna. Today, like every day, the tribe moved cautiously through the tall grasses, their eyes scanning the horizon. The men carried spears made from sharpened stones, while the women carried baskets woven from grasses, filled with fruits and herbs. Children stayed close to their mothers, their small hands gripping the rough fibers of the baskets, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. As they moved toward a nearby river, the sound of the elephant's trumpets echoed through the valley. A sudden movement in the underbrush startled the group. Something was near. The hunter at the front raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. They crouched low, barely making a sound. A herd of smaller antelopes grazed just ahead, unaware of the tribe's presence. The hunters in the group, silent as shadows, began to move into position, preparing for the chase. But then a low rumble vibrated through the earth, a warning not from the antelopes, but from the massive elephants. The herd had caught wind of the tribe's presence, and with it came an undeniable tension. The tribe was far from the only creatures hunting for food, and the elephants were not known for their tolerance of intruders. The hunters, their hearts pounding, exchanged quick glances. This would not be a simple hunt. Suddenly, the ground shook more violently, and from the trees emerged the mighty giants, their massive forms blocking the path to the river. The elephants, in all their majesty and power, seemed unbothered by the small group of humans. But the tribe had seen this before, the danger in their presence. The giants moved slowly, methodically, their large trunks sweeping through the air as they took each step. Their massive tusks glinted in the sunlight, a stark reminder of their ability to defend their territory. The tribe quickly realized their predicament. Without a water source, their survival was at risk. They had to find a way to pass through the elephant's territory to get to the river without provoking the great beasts. But as the tension mounted, the first crack of thunder echoed across the sky. A storm was coming. The sky darkened rapidly, turning a deep shade of gray as the first raindrops began to fall. The tribe's hunters exchanged worried glances, but there was no time to waste. They had no choice but to move. The elephants, still unbothered by their presence, continued their slow march, oblivious to the impending storm. The hunters made their moves silently and cautiously, slipping past the massive creatures, their hearts pounding in their chests. But as they reached the river's edge, the ground trembled again, this time not from the elephants. A sudden rustling in the trees revealed a new threat. Another herd of elephants had appeared from the dense forest, their massive bodies blocking the way forward. The tribe was trapped between the two herds, the giant creatures forming a living wall around them. The rain intensified, turning the ground into a slippery mire, making it harder for the hunters to move. The elephants, sensing the heightened tension, began to trumpet their deep calls, shaking the air. The leaders of the two herds were slowly advancing toward each other, their tusks clashing in a display of dominance. The tribe's only hope was to wait for the storm to pass, but their position was precarious. One of the hunters, a seasoned warrior with a sharp eye, noticed a gap between the two herds, a brief moment of opportunity. The tribe had to act quickly, or the elephants would force them into a deadly confrontation. With a whispered command, the tribe moved in synchrony, threading their way through the rain-soaked underbrush, carefully avoiding the giant's path. As they made their way across the treacherous land, the tribe's leader kept a sharp watch on the massive elephants, their thick hides glistening with rain. Every step they took echoed like a thunderclap, reverberating through the air. With every passing second, the tension grew, and the tribe felt the weight of their vulnerability. They could not afford to make a single wrong move. Then, just as they neared the gap between the two herds, a young hunter stumbled, his foot slipping on the wet ground. The sound of his fall sent a ripple of movement through the nearby elephants, and within moments, the nearest herd began to charge. The tribe scattered, but the young hunter was caught in the stampede's path. The leader acted swiftly, grabbing the hunter by the arm and pulling him out of harm's way just as the elephants thundered past them, their massive feet pounding the earth with terrifying force. The ground shook, and the air was filled with the deafening sound of hooves striking the mud. Once the herd had passed, the tribe regrouped, hearts racing, adrenaline still surging through their bodies. They had survived the stampede, but the danger was far from over. The elephants, now out of sight, were still a constant threat, and the storm showed no sign of letting up. But there, in the midst of the chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged. The young hunter, his face pale but resolute, looked toward the river once more. The path was clear. They had made it past the elephants, and now they could reach the water source. The tribe, battered but alive, moved forward, knowing that their struggle was far from over. But for now, they had conquered the savannah's greatest giants. The tribe moved swiftly, pushing forward despite their exhaustion. The rain continued to pour, but it no longer seemed to matter. The fear and tension that had gripped them moments ago began to melt away, replaced by the sheer relief of surviving the stampede. Each step they took felt like a victory. They were still alive. They had made it past the elephants, but the danger was far from over. As they neared the river's edge, the leader motioned for the tribe to stop. The group huddled together, looking to their leader for guidance. The elephants were still in the area, roaming between the trees, their massive bodies swaying gently in the rain. The tribe's survival now depended on moving past them without provoking them further. The leader surveyed the area carefully. The elephants were grazing, their attention focused on the trees and the muddy water, seemingly oblivious to the tribe's presence. But the danger was real. If they ventured too close, the herd could turn on them. They would have to take the risk and move quickly. He pointed toward a narrow path leading between the trees, just wide enough for the tribe to pass. It was their only chance. The group, silent and determined, began moving, keeping to the shadows and avoiding the path of the elephants. The tension was palpable, every step a calculated risk. Just as they reached the narrow gap between the trees, a rumbling sound filled the air. One of the elephants, sensing their presence, trumpeted loudly. The earth shook as it turned, its massive trunk raised in warning. The tribe froze, heartbeats quickening, unsure of what would come next. But then, as if by instinct, the herd moved away, its members retreating into the dense foliage. The leader held his breath, watching as the giant creatures slowly disappeared into the rain-soaked distance. They had been lucky. The elephants had allowed them to pass. The tribe, though shaken, continued on now, closer to the river and the shelter they so desperately needed. As they crossed the river's edge, the storm began to subside, the clouds parting to reveal the stars above. For a moment, it felt as though the world had been reborn. the earth washing away the remnants of fear and tension. They had faced the giants of the savannah, survived the stampede, and made it through the storm. Together, they had overcome the odds, and the bond between them had grown stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, as they huddled together beneath the shelter, they knew that as long as they stood united, they would survive. The rain had stopped the savannah quiet once more, and the tribe was ready to face whatever came next together.